With its ungainly high wings, fixed landing gear, and massive wheel spats jutting from its sides, the old-fashioned Westland Lysander certainly cut a strange silhouette in the perilous skies of World War II. Looking more like a biplane that had lost its bottom wings, this peculiar dragonfly failed at virtually every combat role it was given. Too slow to dodge Luftwaffe fighters, too cumbersome for bombing runs, too conspicuous for reconnaissance. In the dark days of 1940, nearly 90 of these odd-looking aircraft perished in just a few weeks in the skies over France. Yet there was one thing this apparent failure could do better than any other aircraft in Britain's arsenal. With incredible short takeoff and landing abilities, it could squeeze onto tiny runways where most aircraft could never even dream of touching down. As the war entered its darkest phase, this unique capability would transform the Lysander from a disappointing, ugly duckling into Britain's #1 aerial secret agent. Background and development. The Westland Lysander started life in the 1930s as what was known as an Army cooperation aircraft, designed to assist ground forces with reconnaissance, artillery spotting, liaison, message dropping, and light bombing. In response to Air Ministry Specification A3934, Britain manufacturer Westland Aircraft Works set about conducting extensive research in order to establish the design features and capabilities that would allow an aircraft to perform Army cooperation duties most successfully. Westland's young and ambitious technical director, W.E.W. Teddy Petter, who would later go on to create aircraft such as the English Electric Canberra and the Folland Net, interviewed RAF pilots in the hope that their insights would help give the company's proposal the edge over those of rivals Hawker, Avro, and Bristol. Petter was able to glean that the pilots were looking for an aircraft with a wide field of view, excellent low-speed handling, and the ability to perform short takeoffs and landings. With this in mind, he and Westland chief designer Arthur Davenport got to work on their submission. Fortunately for Westland, Petter's research paid off, and the Air Ministry approved the construction of a prototype, which began in June 1935. A year later, it was ready to be unveiled. Design. Originally known as the P-8, Westland's design may have seemed peculiar to many. With its high-mounted wings, fixed landing gear, and huge wheel spats, it looked rather old-fashioned next to the sleek, retractable gear fighters that were by then already in the testing phase, such as the Hurricane and Spitfire. Yet this odd-looking, antiquated aircraft was more technologically sophisticated than its appearance let on. With an unusual reverse taper towards the root, creating the impression of a bent gull wing, despite having straight spars, the distinctive high wing was to serve multiple purposes. As well as providing excellent downward visibility for Army cooperation duties, it allowed the fitting of fully automated wing slats and slotted flaps. Advanced features for the time, which reduced the pilot's workload during takeoff and landing. These would work together with a variable incidence tailplane to give the aircraft exceptional slow flight capabilities, allowing it to settle on tiny improvised airstrips at just 65 miles per hour. Pilots would later observe that the Bristol Mercury-powered aircraft descended, quote, if not like a lift, at least like an escalator. What's more, the fabric-covered wings were thickest at their strut anchorage points, similar to the successful Stinson-reliant transport aircraft, providing strength where it was most needed, without adding unnecessary heft elsewhere. Weight was also kept low, using duralumin, a strong but lightweight aluminum alloy for the forward fuselage, and stainless steel for the rear. This would help improve fuel efficiency and range, critical for the long reconnaissance missions it was designed to carry out. Meanwhile, the oversized wheel spats contained mountings for a Browning machine gun, fittings for removable stub wings that could carry bombs or supply canisters, and housed the main landing gear itself. The gear was mounted on an innovative inverted U-shaped tube, the largest electron alloy extrusion manufactured at the time, which also supported the wing struts at its apex and contained internal springs for the wheels to enhance shock absorption and improve stability on landing. Testing and entry into service. Petter and Davenport's P-8 prototype performed its maiden flight on June 15, 1936, at the Westland Aerodrome in Yeovil, Somerset, with the company's chief test pilot, Harold Penrose, at the controls. The Air Ministry was impressed with the aircraft's performance, especially its short takeoff and landing abilities, and in September of that year, it placed an order for 144 units. A second P-8 prototype flew for the first time on December 11th, and testing continued into 1937. In keeping with the tradition of Army cooperation aircraft being named after ancient heroes, it was given a new name, the Lysander, in honor of the Spartan admiral who defeated the Athenian fleet in the Peloponnesian War. In June 1938, No. 16 Squadron of RAF Old Sarum became the first to receive the Lysander Mark I, replacing the Hawker Audax, with several other squadrons acquiring the aircraft in the following months. These battle-ready versions included a pintle-mounted 303-inch Lewis or Vickers K machine gun in the rear cockpit, and could carry up to 500 pounds of bombs under its wings, as well as 4 20-pound bombs under its rear fuselage. Before long, Lysanders would also be incorporated into the Royal Canadian Air Force, which used a combination of British-built units and those manufactured under license in Malton, Ontario by National Steel Car. While the first generation of Lysanders entered service, at Westland, work was underway on the Lysander Mark II, which featured the more powerful Bristol Perseus sleeve valve engine. By the time World War II broke out in September 1939, most RAF squadrons had already replaced their Mark I's with this new version. A disappointing start. The following month, as the British Expeditionary Force crossed the English Channel, it was accompanied by 4 Lysander squadrons, joined by a 5th in early 1940. Before long, they would be put to the ultimate test, going head-to-head with the Luftwaffe over the skies of France and the Low Countries as the German war machine closed in. Nicknamed Lizzies and deployed as spotters and light bombers, the Lysanders soon discovered that their low speed and limited armament left them extremely vulnerable to enemy fighters, even when accompanied by Hurricane escorts. The Germans also quickly realized they were sitting ducks and took full advantage of their weakness to shoot them down in large numbers. In May and June 1940, 88 of the 175 Lysanders fighting in Europe were claimed by the Luftwaffe in aerial victories, with an additional 30 destroyed while on the ground. On one supply-dropping mission to assist soldiers in Calais, a squadron made up of Lysanders and Hectors lost 14 of its 16 aircraft. Though the Lysander had shown significant promise in peacetime, in the face of the ruthless and devastatingly effective German blitzkrieg, its flaws were painfully clear. The Commander-in-Chief of the British Air Forces in France, Air Marshal Arthur Barrett, concluded that it was, quote, quite unsuited to the task. A faster, less vulnerable aircraft was required. As 1940 wore on, it seemed the Lysander's days were numbered. If it had looked somewhat outdated when it first took to the skies in 1936, it now seemed like a total relic. Removed from frontline action, it was replaced in the reconnaissance role by faster, camera-carrying U.S. belt fighters such as the Curtiss P-40 Tomahawk and North American P-51 Mustang. Meanwhile, artillery directing duties were taken over by the homegrown Taylor-Craft Oster light aircraft. Even the introduction of the new Lysander Mark III in August 1940 had little impact. It was even slower than the previous versions had been. By mid-1941, the Lysander had been relegated to target towing and delivering life rafts to airmen shot down over the Channel, destined to join the likes of the short-lived ferry battle in Blackburn Rock as another embarrassing failure for British aviation. The comeback. Yet against all odds, Westland's strange-looking beast was about to get a second lease on life, not in a supporting role, but as a daring action hero. In August 1941, Britain's remaining Lysanders were incorporated into 138 Squadron, and later 161 Squadron, and given a unique mission. These once unpopular underachievers were about to become aerial secret agents for Britain's Special Operations Executive, or SOE. While these squadrons operated various aircraft, including Hudsons, Halifaxes, and Whitleys, for parachute supply drops, the Lysander would truly distinguish itself through its specialized capabilities. Taking advantage of the Lysander's uncommon ability to take off and land on small makeshift runways deep behind German lines, it would be tasked with going where few else could, and dropping off covert operatives, bombs, equipment, and other crucial items to underground resistance groups in Nazi-occupied Europe. They would also perform bold rescue missions, picking up downed air crews before they could be captured by the enemy. In order to be able to carry out these high-risk, clandestine operations, the Lysanders had to undergo several modifications. Originally, they were painted matte black to evade the enemy as they soared through the night skies. However, this ended up making them stand out more from certain angles, so the upper sections were changed to green and brown, and later green and gray patterns, with only the underside remaining black. They were given extra fuel tanks to increase their range, and a fixed ladder to allow stranded servicemen to board more quickly. The rear cockpit was adapted with a rearward-facing bench and a small shelf, allowing it to carry up to 3 passengers, albeit uncomfortably. In extreme situations, the aircraft could even accommodate a 4th passenger, though this would involve them crouching on the cabin floor. However, in a bid to reduce weight, it was also common for them to be stripped of their machine guns, leaving them even more exposed than before. The missions themselves required extraordinary skill and precision. Navigating using only a map and compass with just the moonlight for illumination, they would only perform their missions on the nights when the moon was at its fullest. This led to the Lysander acquiring a new nickname, the Moonplane, with the units that flew the aircraft becoming known as Moon Squadrons. Their landing zones were typically marked out with flame torches by resistance members. The crews were trained to never rely solely on these, as the Germans were known to try to snare unwary Lysanders by pretending to be friendly forces offering a safe haven. If identification signals were incorrect, if the flare pattern seemed irregular, or if the field didn't match their briefing exactly, pilots would frequently abort landings to avoid the possibility of falling into a trap. Yet real resistance runways were no less risky. Having located one, German troops would often patiently lie in ambush, revealing their presence only when the aircraft was on the point of taking off, in the hope of capturing as many operatives as they could, as well as the aircraft itself. Therefore, when taking off from hostile territory, many pilots would push their engines to maximum power, using boost control override to climb away as rapidly as possible from any potential threats. Despite its vulnerability and the inherent dangers involved in the missions it carried out, the Lysander proved remarkably resilient in its new role. Although the overall casualty rate of SOE agents was relatively high, with 118 of the 418 deployed losing their lives, miraculously, only 1 Lysander was shot down over France, though a handful also crashed upon their return to England due to foggy conditions. Similarly, only 1 Lysander was captured by the Germans, in a March 1942 incident in which the pilot failed to destroy it after having to crash land. However, as a truck carried the Lysander back to base for analysis, it was involved in a collision with a train, which wrecked both the truck and the aircraft, and denied the enemy the chance to study or replicate the design. Where the humble Lizzie had once attracted derision for its notoriously dismal survival rate, it had now, somehow, developed an uncanny knack of evading capture that made it an invaluable asset in maintaining the crucial pipeline of agents and intelligence between Britain and occupied Europe, successfully delivering 101 operatives behind enemy lines and bringing 128 home safely. Legacy. In total, 1,786 Lysanders were produced, operating with air forces across the globe, including those of Australia, Egypt, Finland, India, Ireland, Poland, Portugal, South Africa, Turkey, the United States, and Free France, in addition to Britain and Canada. While the last time the aircraft would see active service was for the Egyptians against Israel in the 1948 Palestine War, it also found use in the civilian sector in Canada, employed by Westland Dusting Service as an aerial applicator. Today, Lysanders can be seen in various museums around the world and making regular appearances at air shows.